Welcome into another PFF college football preview show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton and Wasserman breaking down the biggest games, which would be a chaotic Week 13 of college football. And Dalton, only 2 weeks left in the college football regular season. We already know some teams will be going to play on Conference Championship Saturday, but this is an important week to determine who we playing in Conference Championship Saturday and also who we playing in the college football playoff as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of big games that are going to decide the fate of some of these teams over the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? But the fact that it's only 2 weeks left feels like it went by
Crazy.
so fast. Did it? Just the entire circus that this season has been. But no, it's a big 2 weeks, and we still have a ton of big games left.
Absolutely. So before we start off with our game previews, let's go over our record on the season. And Dawn, you are continuing to build the lead, man. You have a 4-game lead on me as of right now with a 58-27 record. I am 54-31 on the season. We'll see if I can make up some ground here, though, as we start off our Week 13 preview.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I tried to tell you the Jayhawks were dangerous. I tried to tell you, and you didn't believe me. Maybe you believed me a little.
I was telling Eli earlier when we were just doing a powwow just in the producer room a couple hours ago. I was like, Dawn's the best, but the one thing I'll say is when he's right, he is the cockiest MFer of all time.
Of all time?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's all time.
That's why I hate when you're right, man. When you are right, it's the worst.
You just have to bask in the victory, you know. I get, but then there's another week that starts and you have to do it again.
Oh man,
that's why I told you when you were ahead earlier in the year. It's a week in and week out thing. I said there was time. You just had to let me get in a rhythm here.
All right, well that's true. Yeah, let's get into our game preview. Start off with the game that we'll actually be going to, the biggest game of the weekend. That is Indiana at Ohio State. We'll be getting the playoff rankings as of tonight, and I would imagine both these teams will probably be in the top 5, considering they were in the top 5 last week as well. It's a noon Eastern time game on Fox. The storyline to know is pretty simple. The winner of this game essentially clinches a spot in both the Big Ten title game, and you can pretty much say they'll be locking up a college football playoff spot as well. Michigan, Ohio State plays Michigan at the end of the year. Purdue plays Indiana. Indiana plays Purdue at the end of the year. So as long as they win that last game, they'll be into the Big Ten title game, obviously. So the winner of this game would pretty much guarantee itself a spot in the college football playoff because Indiana would have, at worst, an 11-1 record. They would have a signature win over Ohio State as well. Ohio State would, at worst, be 10-2 if they lose to Michigan, say, and they would have also beaten Penn State and Indiana. The loser of this game, though, say if Indiana goes 11-1 with this loss and Ohio State goes 10-2 with this loss, then all of a sudden you're being lumped into the logjam of SEC schools that have 2 losses on the year. That's going to be really interesting. So I think Ohio State probably have a better chance of surviving that because of the win over Penn State, while Indiana wouldn't have really a signature win to fall back on. But it's going to be really interesting. This is a major, major game. Obviously, huge rewards for the winner, and potentially a fatal blow for the loser.
Yeah, no, it's certainly everyone's billing it to be the prove-it game for Indiana, even if they lose close, if they can be competitive enough with the Buckeyes, and they'll give them a lot of credit, obviously. And then I think what's not talked about enough for Ohio State, if they were to go down in this game, like you mentioned, they would have a second loss, and even then, still have to beat Michigan, which they haven't done in a while. I know it's not the same Michigan team we've seen the last couple of years, but you know how things go in the big game there. So I don't know that they'd want to leave it up to just that game to decide their playoff hopes.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, you have the Ohio State offense in this game, and Will Howard has been kind of on fire as of late. So what should we be looking out for in the Buckeyes of the ball?
It kind of might be an understatement. He's got the 8th best passing grade in the country, and I'll be honest with you, over the last couple of weeks, you could argue he's been their best player, and we thought this would be a team that was carried by their defense, and their defense is still arguably the best defense in the country. And then they had Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and ride the run game and let Howard run in play action. But Howard's been really good in drop-back situations. His passing grade this year in non-play action dropbacks, 82.7, when all 4 of his years at Kansas State had hovered around 60. He was essentially just a play-action passer with the Wildcats down there, and now he's gotten into this drop-back game. Now it helps that you have Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka on the outside. You get to throw to those guys, and the threat of the run is always there with the 2 great backs that he has. But this is by far the best that Will Howard has ever played, and just played the position and made throws downfield, right? But I think when it comes to Indiana's pass defense, it's something we haven't got into yet. We talked a lot about their run defense against Michigan because, well, that was the relevant part when you're playing Michigan. But it needs to be said that this is a really good defense all the way around in the passing game as well. Now, I think it is a challenge. It's their biggest challenge by far, facing Will Howard, facing Jeremiah Smith, facing Emeka Egbuka, and I think that could be what this game comes down to. I think their front 7 can keep up with Ohio State's run game. And you talk about first that offensive line, okay? Indiana's 4th in the nation in pass rush grade. Okay, Michael Kamara leads the FBS with 53 pressures, and they've got several other guys up there who can play. James Carpenter, C.J. West. They'll blitz Jalen Walker from his linebacker spot. They have ways they can get after the passer, and we know, the last couple weeks Ohio State's pass protection has been better, but they've also played Purdue and Northwestern, right? So it's something that with the injury to Josh Simmons, it really threw some things off. Since he got hurt in Week 7, Buckeyes are 115th in pass blocking grade. And if it sticks like that, now, again, the last 2 games have been better, but they haven't played any 2 teams that are nowhere near the caliber of Indiana. So up front, there's a challenge blocking Kamara and those guys. And Will Howard, obviously, there's a big drop-off when he's pressured, like most quarterbacks, than when he's in a clean pocket. The less clean pockets, the more of a problem Howard's going to have. We saw that against Penn State. Right? I mean, you got an elite pass rush in Penn State. If Indiana's on that level of pass rush with Kamara and those guys, that's one problem. The other one is Indiana in coverage. Okay, they're obviously talented, but the unique thing with their secondary, they rotate their coverages post-snap more than any team in the country. Very often showing you too high and then rotating to single high, but you don't really know which way it's rotating until the ball snapped. And they mess around a lot in the secondary with these looks. You've mentioned before, a heavy zone coverage team, but they don't show you what they're actually playing in those zone coverages until after the snap. That's an interesting part against Will Howard as well, because when you show him the defense pre-snap and he sees his first read, he's great. But when defenses rotate coverages, got a 58 passing grade. And we saw a good example of that in person at Penn State. The pick 6 that he threw early in the game, Tom Allen showed him cover 1 to start with, rotated back into 2. Will miss the rotation, pick 6 going the other way. He's got 5 turnover-worthy plays this year when defense rotate the coverages post-snap. So I think this is a theme where Will Howard's going to have to see which way the coverage is rotating. What that also does is make the quarterback hold the football a little longer, which can help your pass rush, and a really good one. It all blends together, right? You talk about marrying the coverage with the pass rush. Well, Indiana does that as well as anybody, and it's a twofold problem for Ohio State's passing game in this game.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to be an amazing thing to watch. Is Will Howard has been really, really good lately against an Indiana pass defense has been really good as well. And Dalton's the same thing on the other side of the ball. Indiana's passing game has been one of, if not the best in the country so far, and Ohio State's had one of, if not the best defense in college football so far. Right now, Indiana has the best offensive grade in the Power 4 at 92.4. They're the best receiving grade in the country. They have the Curtis Rourke has the best passing grade in America as well. They're tied for 9th in the Power 4 in pass blocking grade. Only Ole Miss averages more EPA per pass than Indiana this year. Ohio State, though, has a number 1 defense in college football with a 94.2 defensive grade this year. They're 7th in the country in coverage grade. All 5 starters in that secondary should be drafted into the NFL either this year or next year, with Caleb Downs only being a true sophomore. And then all 4 defensive linemen as well should be drafted within probably the first 4 rounds of this year's NFL draft. And they're tied for they're 12th right now in pressure rate. So really it's kind of an unstoppable force, immovable object. So what I try to do here, my side of the preview is, okay, what was their worst game? And what happened in that worst game? So for Indiana, we actually went to their worst offensive performance. That was the 20-15 victory over Michigan. That was actually, Dalton, the only time this year that Indiana has not scored at least 31 points this season. What happened in that game? Michigan's defensive line dominated Indiana in that game. 43.8% pressure rate, 40.6 pass blocking grade. The Ohio State defensive line is not as good as the Michigan defensive line, I would say. I think the Michigan D-line is probably the best in college football, but Ohio State's at least like top 3 to 5 in college football right now. So that is easily the next best defensive line that Indiana's faced this year, so that could be a big problem for Indiana. Ohio State, their worst performance was in a 32-31 loss to Oregon a month ago. That was the only time this year that Ohio State allowed more than 17 points, was in that when they allowed 32 to Oregon. In that game, Oregon attacked the perimeter of Ohio State's defense, kind of just avoiding Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom, what I think is the best safety duo in college football. They just avoided that really altogether. Of Dylan Gabriel's 36 completions in that game, only 5 of them came within the hashes, inside the hashes. So a lot of them were down the sideline, down the field, and Denzel Burke was really the one he picked on a lot in that game. Probably the worst game of his career. He allowed all 8 of his targets to be caught for 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, a perfect or maybe imperfect passer rating when targeted for Denzel Burke, 158.3 passer rating when Denzel Burke was targeted. So I think that's another avenue too. Is you got to attack the corners of Ohio State, not the safeties. And Curtis Rourke right now is the highest graded quarterback in the nation on throws outside of the numbers, but he's only 95th in attempts right now. So Indiana's offense is really predicated on that RPO game, winning over the middle of the field. I think this game, he should be looking to target more of the outside with his Ohio State corners on Saturday.
I agree with that. I think Curtis Rourke is going to have to put together a Heisman-level performance, because what I worry about with Indiana against Ohio State, you mentioned the offensive line, I'm not sure how much they're going to get out of their run game. And Tyson Lawton and Justice Ellison have been really good in the backfield for them. I thought there were stretches in the Michigan game where they were good, especially in the first half. But that was really a problem for me, is the running between the tackles for them shut down in the second half of that game. I believe, what was my number? I think they only had 18 total yards in the second half against Michigan. So I wouldn't expect it to be shut down like that, because Michigan's defensive line, like you mentioned, causes everybody problems, right?
Yes.
You have to adjust your entire game plan. And I thought for a half, Indiana was really good. They were dominating the first half of that game. Second half, it just got dragged into Michigan's tempo. So I do think that is the hardest part for me, is the front four against Ohio State. I'm looking at Tyleik Williams, especially between the tackles. If Indiana isn't a threat to run between the tackles, the RPO stuff gets a little less effective, because it's not actually a two-way go. You're just trying to throw the football, right? I think that's what it's going to come down to, is Curtis Rourke being, honestly, as special as he's been all season. He's the highest graded quarterback in the country under pressure. You mentioned outside the numbers, but they don't throw it a whole lot. We'll see if there's any adjustments made there, but I think it might even start with Curtis Rourke dropping back, throwing the football, and then working back to the run game. Because if Ohio State's stacking the box, I have a hard time thinking Indiana's going to get a ton of rushing yards on them.
Definitely. So, Dalton, in a game that will likely determine who plays Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, who will win in this top 5 matchup?
I've said for a while, I do think Indiana. I know the talk is about what the margin could be in this game and the spread, and how much if Indiana loses by a lot and what happens in that scenario. I don't think they're going to lose by a lot. I think they're really good. I think they are one of the 12 best teams in the country. I'm taking Ohio State 31-24, but I think it's going to be a really good football game. I think you have two great defenses going at it. I think you have two really good quarterbacks going at it. I think Indiana's ability to stop the run themselves, are one of the best run defenses in the country, is going to be a big factor when you talk about, again, it still does start with Quinshon and Travion in the backfield and putting them in good situations, and you don't want Will Howard to always be working in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, right? So I think both teams have two dimensions they can go to, but I think Ohio State is a little more balanced, and Indiana, I'm sitting on this thing where I think they're going to have a hard time running the football in this game, just like we saw in the second half against Michigan. So I'll take Ohio State by 7. I think Indiana's defense keeps them in it. I think Curtis Rourke is going to go out and have a good game. I think he would have to have a special, extremely memorable game to win this one on the road in Ohio State. But I think Indiana still proves their worth even in a tight loss.
It's the type of game that will get him to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Not win the Heisman Trophy, but I think that could get him to the Heisman Trophy ceremony as a finalist. So I also have Ohio State winning, though. I have by a little bit of a bigger margin than you. I have it 34-21. I think the Buckeyes defense will do enough to stifle Curtis Rourke in that passing attack, while I really struggle to see how Indiana's going to contain these weapons that Ohio State has offensively. So I think the Hoosiers will suffer their first loss of the season, and that could ultimately, Dawn, be fatal for their college football playoff hopes at an 11-1 record. We'll see what happens with the committee if they do end up losing this game. By how much they lose could also be a huge talking point as well. But I got Ohio State winning by 13 over Indiana, and what is the biggest game of the weekend. Another big game at noon, though, that is Ole Miss at Florida. It's a noon game on ABC. Really, Ole Miss trying to look to solidify a playoff spot right now. They're clinging to a playoff spot right now with 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. They already have beaten Georgia, though, so they are in a good position to make the college football playoff as long as they win their final 2 games against Florida and Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. Of those 2 teams, the more likely to play the role of spoiler is the Florida Gators, as right now Mississippi State is most likely going to finish with a 2-10 record so far this year. Florida is a far better team at 5-5, and Dawn, Florida has beaten both Kentucky and LSU by a combined 39 points. Those 2 schools were the only 2 schools to beat Ole Miss this year. So Florida dominated the 2 schools that have already beaten Ole Miss this year. Also, this game is occurring in the Swamp as well. So this is not a game to look over if you're the Ole Miss Rebels.
No, it's not. We've got a couple of these this week as teams. A lot of the teams that we talk about, hey, just take care of business and get your way to the playoff. Well, it's not always that easy, especially when you're talking about on the road and Florida's playing to try to get in a bowl game, right? And I know they're playing Florida State next week, but you'd rather get that going as soon as you can instead of bringing it down to a rivalry game because you never know what happens there. But no, Florida's playing with confidence, and I think that big win for LSU that really helps the case of them keeping Billy Napier and trying to roll with him and DJ Lagway and keep the whole program rolling in the same direction, right, as opposed to breaking it all up again. But Ole Miss, it's definitely a threat, and I think seeing Florida beat LSU on tape last week should have Ole Miss on high alert.
They're really on high alert. And Dalton, you have the Ole Miss offense in this game, so what should we be looking out for when Jackson Dart and the Rebels have the ball?
So I think this comes down to Ole Miss and Jackson Dart being he's the best play-action quarterback in the country this season. A 93.6 play-action passing grade leads the nation. He's got like 600 more passing yards in play-action than any other quarterback in the country. This is what Ole Miss does, right? There's three things in their passing game. They take shots off play-action down the sideline, they'll drag the tight ends over the middle, or they'll use the RPO game to get in the flat. It's really just kind of three levels, and it's kind of a simple passing game, but it's really effective because of the way they get people to move, right? In Florida, before last week, they were 99th in the country in play-action coverage grade, okay? And we've talked all year about Florida's secondary struggling. Last week, they were really good. They had an 85 coverage grade against LSU's play-action, but LSU also isn't known as a great play-action team, a great running team. There's not a whole lot of diversity to their offense.
They know Garrett Nussmeyer's from the ball.
We all know. You can ball fake it all you want. We know what LSU's offense is doing 80% of the time, right? This is a different animal, and I think talked about before, Ole Miss, they got more conservative a little bit in their passing game as they got back into rhythm, right? The Oklahoma game, the Arkansas game, they got away from just lining up and throwing go balls, right? They got back to what they do best, and that's run play action and attack every inch of the field, right? And they did it without Trey Harris. I think it forced them to do it. Actually, it sounds funny, but I think for the sake of their offense, Trey Harris's injury and having to retool because of it may have actually saved their season. Because against LSU, they were chucking up go balls, and then Harris got hurt, and then they kept doing it, and they didn't know what to do to adjust, okay? Now it's more of a mix. You get the intermediate passes going, you get the RPOs going, and now this week, from what Lane Kiffin's been saying, Trey Harris is coming back. So now you know all this. You have Jordan Watkins playing well. You have Caden Lee playing well in the slot. Daquan Wright playing well. He's kind of playing more than Caden Prescorn nowadays, right? Now Trey Harris comes back in as the vertical threat to add on to it. And I'm curious to see if now we can just put it all together and we have all the best elements of this offense with Trey Harris back in as the vertical threat, but keep using those other guys underneath, keep using the play action, get the run game going a little. They've been struggling to run the ball this year, but they can still space it out. The play action can back off linebackers, and you can really start controlling people. But that's what I want to see, is how much Ole Miss can stay in the rhythm of play action, because that's the other thing that they lost when they had those 3 games they were struggling, is they stopped running it. They ran play action a lot less. Now they've been getting back to it. It's been as effective as it's ever been. Now you get Harris back. Stack up every good thing you've been doing in this offense and put together what could be your best offensive effort of the season, along with that Arkansas game with a Florida secondary who has still mostly struggled this season.
Yeah, they've had some issues, obviously, but they have been playing a little bit better down the stretch of the season so far. Other side of the ball, Dawn, is really, can Ole Miss limit the deep ball from DJ Lagway, the true freshman quarterback, who's had, let's face it, a little bit of a roller coaster season for Florida so far, but they're all there. As in any roller coaster, there are the highs there as well. And DJ Lagway has that ridiculous arm that made him the #1 quarterback in the country coming out of high school. And Dalton, this year, he has a 99.4 passing grade on deep throws this season. That is the highest among all quarterbacks in America by 3.6 points. He has 13 big-time throws on deep throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays on deep throws. The only other quarterback in America who has that many big-time throws on deep passes with 0 turnover-worthy plays is Shedeur Sanders right now. So DJ Lagway has been, by all accounts, one of, probably, if not the best deep ball thrower that we have in college football. On the other side of the Dawn, he's the lowest graded quarterback in the Power 4 on short and intermediate throws. So basically everything but deep throws, DJ Lagway is the lowest graded quarterback that we have in the Power 4 with a 47.9 passing grade. He has the worst adjusted completion rate in the Power 4, which, if you don't know, is your completion rate plus any drops. He has a 64.4% adjusted completion rate on those short and intermediate throws, lowest in the Power 4. So best in the country on deep throws and one of the worst in the country on short and intermediate throws. He's still kind of figuring it out as a very, very young quarterback. Ole Miss this year has the 4th highest graded defense in America with the 8th best grade on short and intermediate throws at 82.9. But that figure drops down to 81st in the country on deep throws with a 49.6 defensive grade on deep passes, and they're 104th in EPA per play on deep passes as well. They've had some issues allowing deep throws outside the numbers on their secondary. That's an area that DJ Lagway is excelling right now. But the best way, I think, to limit the deep ball is to not even let him throw the deep ball in the first place. And how they can do that, Dalton, is with one of the best defensive lines in college football. They have the 2nd best pass rushing grade in college football, only behind Michigan at 90.3. 216 pressures on the year, tied for the most in America as well. I will say Florida's pass blocking has been pretty strong this year. They're right now 14th in pass blocking grade, but this defensive line can take away DJ Lagway's deep throws to not even give the secondary an opportunity to mess it up, honestly. So really, if the Ole Miss defensive line can get to Lagway quickly, he won't have time to stand back there and throw the deep ball. That could be a big matchup to watch in this Ole Miss Florida game.
Yeah, and I think you saw last week what happened with the Florida-LSU game, and LSU is a team that gives up a lot of explosive plays. Florida only ran, 44 plays in that game, and 11 of them were explosive. So if you do prevent that, I think if you're Ole Miss defense, you're in a really good spot, and I think we've seen all year their front seven has controlled games. I think Florida could have an issue running the ball, and when you're that high variance in the passing game, it can be really high like it was last week, and then there's other times where it can go against you. That's not the only time that I'll talk about something like that today, but Florida, yeah, that's what they're riding right now. Let a young kid play with his talent. I know you've mentioned some things about his footwork and needing some polish on that, especially, and that's where the shorter throws and the intermediate accuracy comes from, really, is from your feet. So there's certainly a lot to work on for Lagway, but he's a home run threat. There's no doubt about that. And if you give up a couple of those home runs we saw last week, when they run 44 plays and LSU runs 92 or 93, and the team with 44 wins, that's why it happens. It's because they can make big plays and 70-yard touchdowns at any given time.
So, Dalton, in a game that Ole Miss has to win to keep their college football playoff hopes alive, will they win this game in the Swamp, or will the second time in 2 weeks, will Florida play spoiler?
I just think Ole Miss is a different animal than LSU. With their defense, with LSU's defense and the way that their offense was so one-dimensional, I was kind of waiting for the bottom to fall out like that. We saw it in the Bama game and now 2 weeks in a row in the Florida game. But Ole Miss's defense has been one of the most reliable units in the country. I think a freshman like Lagway is going to struggle. I think Ole Miss has found their groove. I think as long as their offensive line holds up, which is really still the biggest question on their team, you get Trey Harris back, you've established Jordan Watkins, again, Caden Lee, Daquan Wright, Caden Prieskorn is still there, all the weapons they have. I really like Ole Miss in this game. I think they're going to take care of business. They're getting hot at the right time, 38-20 Rebels.
Yeah, I've got it as a two-score game, or at least a two-score game as well. I have it 35-21 Ole Miss winning this game. I think their pass rush will really limit Lagway's deep ball on this one. And I think the Florida secondary should have a lot of issues containing Jackson.
Got the Princely revenge game, too. I didn't even think about that. We got a revenge game alert. Yeah,
revenge game. Funny to say revenge game when Florida would have loved to have him come back. But anyways, he's still going up against his former team, absolutely. So that's a great call by you. But yeah, I just think the secondary for Florida is going to have a lot of issues containing Jackson Dart, who's been one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year, and the Ole Miss passing has been one of the best in college football. Like I said before, they lead the nation in EPA per pass this year so far. So I do think Ole Miss will win this game 35-21 and keep their playoff hopes alive and move one win away against Mississippi State from probably clinching a college football playoff spot as well. So I got Ole Miss winning 35-21. Let's go to a huge Big 12 game. That is BYU at Arizona State, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Storylines, no, pretty simple. The winner of this game puts themselves in a great position for the Big 12 title race because just like Indiana, Ohio State, this game between BYU and Arizona State will more than likely determine who will be playing in the Big 12 title game on Conference Championship weekend. BYU suffered their first loss of the season this past week to Kansas, but they still control their own destiny in the conference race. As long as BYU wins its final two games against Arizona State and against Houston, they will be playing in the Big 12 championship game. The Sun Devils aren't in complete control of their own destiny. And I was going through a bunch of tiebreaker scenarios, Dalton. I don't want to break it all down for us because we'll be here for 45 minutes probably. But Arizona State, I can tell you, is in a really good position if they win this game over BYU and hand them their second straight loss of the season. So massive game to determine maybe who will be playing for the Big 12 title.
No, absolutely. I think Arizona State is they're very much alive. I think what would it take? Another loss from Iowa State maybe, and they run the table.
There's like three different things like that could happen and
the tiebreakers.
So it'll happen.
The tiebreakers will get weird between the two lost teams if we get there. But no, this is I think this is the second biggest game actually of college football this weekend. I think when you look at the story of BYU and the Magic ran out a little bit last week and they missed some opportunities against Kansas, and very quietly Arizona State's one of the hottest teams in the country, and in Arizona State too, this is not going to be a fun environment for BYU to go to this week.
No, absolutely not. Not only that, I should have said, not only is this for a spot in the Big 12 title game, but also a playoff spot as well. Because the loser of this game will not be playing in the Big 12 title game. You're not making the college football playoff.
I don't think I've heard a single person mention like Arizona State actually could make the playoff. It's not just a theory. They're really 3 wins from it, from also being the same as Colorado, the same as BYU or Iowa State, or Arizona State's like right in that mix at 8-2 currently, and 2 conference losses. You're not out of it. If you can still win your conference at this time of year, you're squarely in it.
And that BYU loss to Kansas, we said this on the review show too. That all but confirmed the Big 12 is a one-bid league.
Yep.
Whoever wins the Big 12 title will be at the college football playoff. Nobody else is making a college football playoff out of the Big 12 unless other than the conference champions. So, Dalton, you have the Arizona State offense. What should we be looking out for when the Sun Devils on the ball?
Okay, there's a lot here because we haven't dug in on this offense too much this year. So let's start with Sam Leavitt at quarterback. Okay, Arizona State's won 5 of their last 6 games. The one game they lost, they did not have Sam Leavitt due to injury. So he's on a 5-game winning streak. And I'm going to tell you, it's very much because of him. He's been raging hot lately since week 6, okay? The first of those 5 wins, 90 passing grade. That's third best in the country. All right, 75% adjusted completion rate, 14 touchdowns, only 2 turnover-worthy plays. He's been really safe with the football all season, right? And he's got some dual threat to him. He can run around and make plays, especially after the 2.5, 3-second mark. He makes a lot of plays with his feet and on the move. He can run. He can throw on the move. Sam Leavitt can do a lot of different things. And this passing game is emerging. And I think it was in the preseason maybe the biggest question that we have, okay? You're talking about a redshirt freshman coming in from Michigan State. He was kind of abandoned by Michigan State because Jonathan Smith went in there and he had his guy in Aiden Childs, and really kind of an underdog that's coming through in a nice way for Arizona State right now. But he's been raging hot. Him, and I think because of him and Cam Skattebo and Jordan Tyson at receiver, this is just a really hard team to match up with, because I can't sit here and tell you that Sam Leavitt's just doing one thing great. If you look at all the grading profile and all the stats, he's actually a pretty balanced player. Like, he's not just one of those guys, oh, well, just blitz him and he'll cave. It's not like that. Or make him hold the football and he'll cave, or this part of the field or that. He's just been really all around solid. I can't find like one specific weakness. And I think the one thing I wouldn't do is get in man-to-man coverage with this team, because Jordan Tyson is raging hot. In that same stretch, he's been one of the best receivers in college football. Cam Skattebo was third among all backs in receiving yards. If you get in man-to-man coverage and you think you can just cover this team and you think you're better than them, you're asking for a world of hurt, because, just Tyson can beat you. They've been using him more on the outside lately. Skattebo can beat you out of the backfield. Not to mention, they run and pass right around 50-50. Right? I think they run actually about 52% of the time. This is a balanced team with multiple threats on offense, with a really good quarterback, and they can do a lot of different things. This isn't just some one-trick pony team like it was last year, even earlier this year. They've developed a legitimate threat of a passing game, but it starts with Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson, and then Skattebo out of the backfield. They do a lot of creative things with, and Leavitt can really improvise. There's a lot of problems this offense can cause, and BYU's going to have to be ready for all of them.
Dalton, a couple nights ago, we were talking at Nats, a great bar here in Cincinnati, and Trevor was asking us, okay, 2026 NFL draft, who would like guys to know, who are the quarterbacks to know? And we're like, all right, well, obviously Arch Manning, right? And then we're like, all right, who else after that? And we're trying to think, and we're
just a thought. It could be both the quarterbacks in this game.
But Sam Leavitt, we're like, dude, he is really playing well this year. So he's all of a sudden becoming a guy to know in the 2026 NFL draft. Is only a redshirt freshman this year as well. So really been impressed by what he's been doing lately for Arizona State. A guy that we've been impressed by all year, Dalton, our guy, Jake Retzlaff, has been outstanding for BYU all year. 82.8 PFF grade this year, 48.3 grade last year. He has been one of the most improved players in the college football, if not the most improved player. That's why we're naming the Jake Retzlaff Award after him for the most improved player in college football as well. The one thing I'll say, though, about Jake, there has been a pretty clear line of demarcation of when defenses speed him up versus when they don't speed him up. So when he's kept clean this year, he has the 14th best passing grade in college football. When he's not blitzed, the 4th best passing grade in college football. But when he's under pressure, that falls to 86th in America. When he's blitzed, it's 117th in America. There is a pretty clear line here between Jake Retzlaff when he has time in the pocket to find open receivers, because he is a really, really smart quarterback. And in our interview, you'd see that as well, where he said, hey, when they don't blitz me, I know what coverage they're in, and I know how to attack it. And we have so many route concepts at BYU that we could beat any coverage with those route concepts. So I know exactly where to go with the football. He goes from his first read to his second read to his third read really quickly. But when they speed him up, he can't do that. And when they blitz, obviously, like you said before, they disguise coverages a lot as well. So he has had issues when he's under pressure and when he's blitzed this year. Fortunately for him, though, Arizona State has really, really struggled to get after the quarterback this year. Right now, Dalton, they have the second worst pass rushing grade in all of college football at 56.9. Only Mississippi State has a worse pass rushing grade than Arizona State this year. Arizona State also the third worst pass rush win rate in college football, right around 21%. Only a 24% pressure rate this year, the third worst in the Power 4. And they don't blitz that much either. They're right now 110th in blitz rate at 27%. So I really think the Sun Devils need to blitz far more often against Jake Retzlaff in this game to help out their really struggling pass rush, or else I think Jake Retzlaff could pick them apart.
Yeah, I think Arizona State's got an interesting defense because they don't have a whole lot in the interior and their defensive line that's very disruptive. They've kind of committed themselves to the athletes they have and playing coverage and making open field tackles, right? Which is fine. They're fast and they're aggressive. They're just not as good up front. And they probably need another year to get in the portal and get in recruiting. And kind of like Colorado did, where it's like, okay, year 2 of this success, or what's supposed to be a successful season, should be, okay, now we got to get better in the trenches. That's absolutely true, what you said about their pass rush, and it could be a big factor. You're right. If you don't get to Retzlaff, he's really, really good. I will say Arizona State, there are moments where sometimes they're a team I feel like that could adjust, though.
Yeah,
like, some teams are just stubborn and they're like, no, we're not blitzing. Yeah. We're not doing it. Like, I think even last year, remember last year they played Washington and they only lost, 15-7?
Yeah.
They ratcheted up the blitz rate in that game against Michael Penix and those receivers, even though in that game it might have made no sense at all because you have Penix and those guys on the outside, right? We saw it with Kansas State against Colorado, how they ratcheted up the blitzes because you know what? That's going to work against this pass protection. I do feel like there is still a threat, even though they haven't done it a lot this year, that Kenny Dillingham, they could make that adjustment just going, listen, we need a little more. I'm not saying blitz is 62% or whatever Utah did. They're not going to do that. You still have the foundational things on your defense, but maybe just a little more. What is it at, like 25 or 26% right now?
They are at 27% right now.
Maybe just for one day you bring it up to like 35, 40 just to mix it up. I do feel like maybe that's something the Sun Devils would do because, look, I think the one thing BYU doesn't have, and I love their 2 receivers, right, Chase Roberts and Darius Lassiter, they don't have a ton of speed. So I think you do feel like, okay, maybe we could man-to-man on this team and press up and see if Retzlaff will complete go balls outside, down outside the numbers and down the sideline, right? I think it's something Utah did with a good amount of success, right? And Utah, again, they're not going to blitz at the rate Utah did, but there's always a threat of the adjustment. I think BYU still needs to be aware of that.
No, that's totally fair too. But Dawn, ultimately, in this game that'll most likely determine who will be playing in the Big 12 title game, who wins?
This is a tough game. This is going to be a fun game. I'm telling you right now. These are 2 really good, well-rounded teams that in Arizona State, this is going to be a loud, tense environment between 2 good teams. BYU suddenly desperate. And I thought it was interesting what Jake Retzlaff said after the game last Saturday was he goes, we didn't, first time this year we didn't have the best week of practice. We lost that attention to detail. Maybe this is what we needed to get mentally back right instead of getting a little bit cocky. I think this is going to be a great football game. I'm riding with the home team, though.
Okay.
I'm taking Arizona State 31-27. I absolutely love the way Sam Leavitt's playing. I love how aggressive this defense is. You mentioned it. If Arizona State does lose this game, it's because they didn't get a pass rush.
Yeah.
That's going to be the reason. And BYU. The other thing too, BYU's run defense. Even though they lost to Kansas last week, they were spectacular last week. They held Kansas to 78 rushing yards last week, which is if you told me they were holding Kansas to 78 rushing yards, I'm like, yeah, they're winning. That's without question. But I think eventually, at the end of the day, it will come down to Leavitt versus Retzloff, and I'm going to take the home team. I'll take Leavitt 31-27.
All right, I'm going to the opposite side here. I am taking BYU 27-24. I'm worried about the Arizona State pass rush, man. And even if they blitz a little bit more, I can't guarantee that it's going to lead to them find much more success in their pass rush, really, because their pass rush has really been that bad this year. And I think Jake Retzloff could have a lot of success against his Arizona State defense. And also, like you said, the BYU run D has been really good this year. And I think against Cam Scadaboo, stopped him enough in this game. I'm taking the road dog here. I'm taking BYU to win by 3 over Arizona State to keep both their Big 12 championship hopes alive and their college football playoff hopes alive as well. So I got BYU by 3 over Arizona State. Let's go to another 3:30 p.m. game on CBS between Penn State and Minnesota. And really, the storyline knows that there's no room for error for Penn State. So right now, the Nittany Lions are 9-1 in the season, and they have a top 5 ranking in the College Football Playoff Committee. We'll see that in obviously an hour or two, but they will be in the top 5 there. So it might seem like Penn State is very safe in the College Football Playoff race with only 2 weeks left in the regular season. However, if they lose either of their final 2 games, Penn State will be in serious trouble because right now their best win came over Illinois, who might be ranked in the College Football Playoff ranking. We'll see later on. But a loss to either Minnesota or Maryland could prove to be a fatal blow for Penn State's playoff hopes. And of those two, the Golden Gophers are far more likely to pull off the upset as it comes on the road in Minneapolis. And right now, Minnesota is 42nd in PFF's power rankings, while Maryland is 87th in PFF's power rankings. So Penn State, I really don't think, Dalton, a 10-2 Penn State would get into the college football playoff with just their looking at their schedule. So they really need to go 11-1 this year, or else they're probably not making it.
I totally agree. I think this is a very important game. I think it's a dangerous game. Minnesota, we've seen in the past, the defense and just the way they slow games down. And Max Brosmer has been playing pretty well. Last week, they lost to Rutgers last week. It was a tough loss, but for the most part, Minnesota is still a threat. And I think the type of team that can keep themselves in a game with Penn State very much the same way that Wisconsin did, and we've seen Wisconsin do it a couple of times now. I think Minnesota's in that same brand where they can play defense, they can slow it down. I don't think either team is scoring 40, 45 points in this game. I think it's a dangerous game for Penn State on the road. They can't overlook this or they're going to have a problem.
Definitely. So, Dawn, you actually have the Nittany Lions offense in this one. What should you be looking out for when they have the ball?
Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put it as simple as can be. You should look out for Tyler Warren, and Minnesota should look out for Tyler Warren. At this point, we know Tyler Warren's their best offensive player, right? He's been arguably the best tight end in the country this year. We're going to have the Harold Fannin versus Tyler Warren debates all the way through the Mackey Award ceremony, right? But Warren's just been spectacular. On top of lining up all over the place, he's running the ball, he's at quarterback, he's at tight end. He's just one of the best players in the country. Second in the nation in receiving yards by a tight end. Second in yards after catch. Second in receiving grade at 91.8. You can guess who he's second to in all those categories. This is a guy at Bowling Green who's pretty good. But Tyler Warren, just spectacular. And when you talk about this matchup specifically, Minnesota's done a really good job covering tight ends this year. First of all, they're just a really good defense in general. They're 11th in the nation in total defense. They're 12th. They've allowed the 12 lowest points per game in the country, just under 18 points a game. But they've only allowed, against tight ends, a 50.7 passer rating when opponents target tight ends. Fifth best mark in college football. All right. 82.6 coverage grade against tight ends. Ninth best in the country. All right. And they've played some good teams with good tight ends. They played Luke Lachey in Iowa. They played Colston Loveland in Michigan, right? This is not a thing where, okay, they've played bad tight ends all year and now they have to play Tyler Warren. No, they've got good reps against good players, and the big thing is they limit yards after catch. They've only missed one tackle on a tight end all season.
Wow.
All right, and they've only given up 111 yards after the catch to them all season, and a lot of that you're talking about, okay, guys get underneath and they take off after the catch. I think this really comes down to, we talked about in the Ohio State game with Penn State, the two safeties controlling the game, right? Downs and Ransom. Okay, maybe Minnesota doesn't have Downs and Ransom, but they got a pretty good crew over there. You're talking about guys like Coy Parrish and Kerry Brown in the middle of the field. I have to wonder how much of Ohio State's game plan Minnesota is going to work into this and just not let Penn State get up the seams. But it starts with Tyler Warren. And even if Tyler Warren gets the football, you're talking about the king of yards after catch right now among tight ends other than Harold Fannin against a team that really knows how to limit it. I think making tackles on Warren and preventing explosive plays can keep Minnesota in this game.
Absolutely. Tyler Warren has been spectacular this year. Now he's a first-round prospect on PFF's 2025 NFL Draft Big Board as well. You can find it at pff.com if you want to check it out, but done by the great Trevor Sycamore. But, yeah, he's been special this year. And now, I mean, it is possible, Dalton, we get 2 tight ends go in the first round of the NFL Draft, which is, I don't know the last time that happened, honestly. Actually, with the Hawkinson year, right, he went first round. I know Noah Fant also went in the first round. His teammate, the 2 Iowa tight ends go in the first round that year.
That sounds right.
Probably is the last time it happened, I would imagine. So, yeah, it's he's been really, really good this year. My matchup to watch, though, is Minnesota's pass protection against Penn State's pass rush. So Max Brosmer has had a really good year as Minnesota's starting quarterback. The New Hampshire transfer has an 86.5 passing grade, 11th among all quarterbacks in America. He's really good when allowed to operate from a clean pocket. He is 6th among all quarterbacks in the country with a 92.2 passing grade from a clean pocket. Dalton, he is 93rd when he's under pressure with a 40.9 passing grade this year. And the Golden Gophers have been just average in pass blocking this year. They've allowed a pressure on about 23% of dropbacks. That's the 70th in college football right now. A lot of alarm bells should be ringing right now because you go against Penn State, currently 3rd in the nation with a 51.3 pass rush win rate, 8th in the country with an 84.8 pass rushing grade. Obviously, a really good run defending team as well. That's a big problem against Abdul Carter, who all of a sudden looks like the number 1 edge defender in the 2025 NFL Draft. A bunch of other stars on the defensive line that you've got to account for as well. It's a big problem. And Dalton, we talked about this before, the Penn State game, and a guy like Luke Altmaier in the Illinois game, where Luke Altmaier is having a really good year, but he's also really good when he's kept clean and really bad when he's under pressure. Kind of reminds me a little bit of this, where Max Brosmer's had an excellent year from a clean pocket and not a very good year when he's under pressure. So that's a big, big time matchup, is whether or not this Minnesota offensive line can just hold up enough against this elite defensive line for Penn State. And also, I want to shout out a matchup to watch for the NFL Draft. Ariante Ursary against Abdur Carter, man, that's probably the best matchup for NFL Draft of the entire weekend, honestly, because both Ursary and Carter are top 20 prospects on our updated big board right now. So both of them could be first-round picks in the NFL Draft. Carter looking like maybe a top 10 pick in the NFL Draft right now as well. We actually have an interview with Ariante Ursary. He's an awesome, awesome guy. Check out that interview. That'll be a really fun match to watch, but this is a critical, critical matchup for this game. Just can Minnesota block Penn State enough to give Max Brosmer time back there?
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about, we've talked about both passing games a lot, but both teams are still going to want to run the ball and dictate the pace up front too. When you talk about Penn State with Allen and Singleton, and then Minnesota with Darius Taylor, who's a really good back, but they struggled last week against Rutgers because Rutgers held Taylor to 28 yards. So I think you're talking about a situation where whichever team can be more physical and run the ball and maybe not get in those obvious drop back situations. I think that's always been the case for Penn State, right, with the lack of receivers. And I know they trust Drew Aller and Tyler Warren more, and Andy Kotelnicki obviously with the play calling, but it helps both of these teams. Whichever one can get two-dimensional, I think that's going to play a big factor. And it did play a big factor. You mentioned the Illinois game for Penn State. They got the run game rolling in the second half, and that's really what made a big difference in them pulling away. So I think whichever team is two-dimensional, can get two-dimensional, is going to come out victorious in this game.
So, Dalton, ultimately, in a game that's really a must-win for Penn State to make the college football playoff, will they win this game, or will Minnesota spoil their season?
I think Minnesota's going to make them earn it. I do. I think, look, they're fundamentally sound. P.J. Fleck always has his team playing hard, playing good defense, and if Penn State doesn't get the run game going, especially with Nick Singleton, then I think they could have some issues. I've got a hard-fought game. I've got Penn State 23-20. I don't think this is going to be an easy task on the road against a good defense. Against, a quarterback who is playing hot lately. Max Brosmer has been really good lately. If they can keep him clean, I think Minnesota does have a shot. They've only lost one game this year by more than one score, and that was the Iowa game, and they were actually ahead in halftime in that game, and Caleb Johnson just teed off on them in the second half. But Penn State doesn't. Nick Singleton, I like him. He's not Caleb Johnson. So I think we're going to get a tight game. I think Minnesota's going to keep it a close defensive game. But I think you're right. Penn State's pass rush and Drew Aller's ball security, even when Penn State's offense is struggling, he doesn't give the football away. I wouldn't bet on a whole lot of turnovers, if any, from Aller, and I think that could make a difference. If Penn State can force a turnover or two, they could flip the game on its head. But I'll take Penn State by a field goal.
I'm taking it by a little bit bigger margin. I got Penn State 30-17. I really think the key is the pass rush. That was the game, the Illinois game, where we said, hey, Illinois can make this a game. They've been playing really well this year. Then Penn State pass rush really took over in that one and just did not make it that close of a game. I think it could be like a lot like that as well in this one against Minnesota. So I have Penn State winning 30-17 with that pass rush and Abdul Carter just absolutely dominating out there. I think that could be a really the big advantage that Penn State has over Minnesota. And I think Nittany Lions move one win away over Maryland for making the 12-team college football playoff. All right, before we get to our next game, and probably the game that a lot of our listeners and viewers are waiting for us to get to, we got to talk about our sponsor of the show, and that is the great Fabric by Gerber Life. Picture a future where your child has the financial freedom to pursue their dreams without any barriers. With a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, it's a real possibility because of the simple but impactful actions that you can take today. It's all online, and setting up an account could take you just 5 minutes with as little as $1 a day. That's right, $1 a day. Then you can manage your child's UGMA account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, a name trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFF NFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFF NFL. meetfabric.com/PFF NFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Dawn, let's get to Colorado at Kansas. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Story wants to know, can Kansas play spoiler for the third straight week? So right now, Kansas with a 4-6 record on the season. A lot of people go, oh, it's just 4-6. Who cares? They're a really dangerous team right now, Dawn. Of their 6 losses, only one of them came by more than 6 points. And right now, Kansas is a top 40 team in the country, according to PFF's power rankings. And over the last 2 weeks, they took down not one, but 2 Big 12 title contenders in Iowa State and BYU, and they're trying to make it 3 in a row this week against Colorado, who currently controls their own destiny in both the Big 12 race and in the college football playoff race as well.
Yeah, good team, bad record. I said it last week, and it's a team that's fallen on a lot of bad luck and turnovers and kind of some of the things that can just lose you the ball games in moments. But I think the thing to mention, too, in those 2 games, they beat Iowa State in a shootout. They beat BYU in a slugfest. They're willing to play any which way as long as they win the ball game, and they're still looking to get into a bowl game and recover to go at least 6-6 and have something to look forward to in the postseason. But no, I mean, we've said it for a couple weeks now. You can't take this Kansas team lightly at all if you're Colorado, and even the spread is showing. I think Colorado's only a 3-point favorite, just like BYU was last week. So there's no reason to overlook this game. There's a lot of games like this week, but this is very much the proof is at least in front of us with Kansas. You beat 2 ranked teams in Iowa State and BYU, who, I mean, they may have ruined their seasons the way the rest of this could go, right? Kansas is really, really dangerous. They have a lot of talent.
And the week before, they only lost by 2 to Kansas State.
They should have won that game.
They almost won that game as well. It could have just been Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU, back-to-back-to-back.
I mean, you're talking about, and look at the teams they've lost to. When you mentioned Kansas State, Jalen Daniels with a couple of late fumbles. UNLV, they very easily could have beat earlier in the year. Illinois was I don't know if they were a ranked team at the time, but we've seen Illinois ranked. Like, these are not just bad teams they're blowing games to. They're losing close games against really good teams.
There's a great comment in our live chat right now from Sycamore Savage saying Kansas was mad that their season was a failure, so they're taking the whole conference down with them.
Yeah,
that's
pretty much.
They're kind of doing that right now.
If you're a team that doesn't have to play Kansas in the stretch run, you should be feeling really lucky. But like Arizona State should feel really good right now that they don't have to play Kansas as they're playing right now, because this is I don't know the whole list of 4-6 teams, but they're probably the best 4-6 team in the country.
That's a great comment right there, Dawn. You have the Kansas offense that was really struggling to start the year, but now all of a sudden they're starting to look like the Kansas offense of last year. What should we be looking out for with the Jayhawks the ball?
Okay, so I'm always looking for new dimensions, and when we have teams multiple weeks in a row, and we find different things to talk about, right? And Kansas, they lead the Power 4 on run blocking grade, and they have Devin Neal, and they have all this Quentin Skinner and Luke Grimm and all stuff. And then the more I look at it, I just go, it's just about Jalen Daniels. So I'm just going to make this speech again. Look, there's 4 games this year where he has at least a 79 passing grade. Kansas has won all 4 of those games. There's 6 games this year where he has below a 69 passing grade. Kansas has lost all 6 of those games. It just comes down to the super high variance of Jalen Daniels. And he made the one big mistake with a late interception against BYU last week. His defense bailed him out. But that was really the only one big mistake he made all day, a passing grade right around 82. BYU, again, I mentioned it earlier, they held Kansas to 78 rushing yards. If you told me before the game BYU did that, I'm like, oh, it's over. It's done because they're only going to give up 17 points and they're going to win. BYU missed their opportunities. Kansas defense, it does have some pieces, especially in the secondary. They can play in the secondary now. It's going to be fun to watch Mello Dotson and those guys against Colorado on your side of things. But this is about Jalen Daniels, and there's a couple of things that stick out. One, deep ball. You mentioned DJ Lagway. Daniels just a veteran version of that. Okay, 18 big-time throws on deep balls this year. 10 of them are in the 4 wins. If he hits the deep ball and he hits home runs, that's what he's become, is just a home run hitter, and that's what we're going to do, then you have a problem, right? Good news for Colorado. You got a good secondary. You've got Hunter, you've got McKinney, you've got Shiloh and Silman Craig, and I'm not sure if Preston Hodge is healthy this week. Well, you got all that stuff, right?
Colton Hood, yeah.
The 11th best coverage grade against deep balls this year. And I know there's been a couple of them that got away, but they've only allowed 13 deep completions all season, and 4 of them were actually last week against Utah in the second half when they were just slinging the ball to sling it because the game was over, right? So before last week, only 9 deep completions all season. Colorado's secondary is really good. They have Travis Hunter. I mean, they're going to be really good, right? And they are. The other thing is Daniels under pressure. This is the bigger one. Now, we talk about guys with splits under pressure. There's maybe no bigger split in college football than this. This makes some other guys, Retzloff and Lagway, under pressure look really good. 32 passing grade under pressure this year, 9.4% turnover-worthy play rate. And why does that come about? Because even under pressure, he's taking shots way downfield. The average depth of target of 15 yards. That's why the completion percentage is low. That's why the turnover-worthy play rate is high. He ain't looking for completions. If you're breathing down his neck in the pass rush, he's still going to throw. He's going to launch it downfield and just see what happens. And that's essentially the highs and lows of this Kansas offense right now. Here's what I'm going to say on the Colorado side. The pass rush, and you've mentioned this the last couple weeks, we're getting nasty with the pass rush now. The last, since week 8, the 6th best pass rush grade in college football, Colorado. Now, the run defense got fixed first. You mentioned it in the few weeks prior, but now we're getting the pass rush going. You know the 2 teams that are sandwiched between, the 2 teams that are 5-7 around them? South Carolina and Oregon. This is the company all of a sudden Colorado's keeping in the pass rush, and there's 2 guys making it happen. B.J. Green, who we thought before the season coming in from Arizona State, like, okay, that guy's going to be their best pass rusher. And Arden Walker has been ridiculous lately. I mean, these last 4 games these 2 guys have played, they are menaces up front. I mean, it's a whole different thing.
Can you say Abdul Carter is the only one with a higher pass rush grade than
Arden Walker? So since that, in that same stretch, since week 8, Colorado's played 4 games. Arden Walker is tied with Abdul Carter for the 3rd best pass rush grade among all edge players. And B.J. Green is 11th. B.J. Green has a better pass rush grade the last 5 weeks than James Pierce Jr.
2 guys who might be top 15 picks.
And Walker's tied for 3rd with Abdul Carter. That's how good these guys have been the last 4 games. And if those 2 are going to control in the pass rush, and they got good interior rushers too, but these 2 guys now have been established as that's the pair of pass rushers. If they get to Daniels, and this is just the way Kansas games, every Kansas game honestly has been about Kansas. If Jalen Daniels makes mistakes, they're going to lose, especially under pressure. If he doesn't make mistakes, they very well could win. If you get pressure on him, you can force him into mistakes, right? I don't think BYU got enough pressure on him last week. Colorado's been doing it lately. If those 2 guys, especially Walker and Green, get after it off the edge the way they have been the last month, then Colorado's absolutely going to win this game.
And Dalton is the same exact matchup on the other side. And I feel like it's a broken record at this point, but Kansas just get after Shedeur Sanders, because Shedeur Sanders, if he's not the best quarterback in the country, he's certainly on the short list right now. And I think his best attribute, you probably agree with me, is his processing ability, right? The ability to diagnose coverages and find the open receiver. He's doing that at an NFL level already. That's only possible, though, to do that if you have time in the pocket, which is why there's a pretty big split between his PFF grades when he's kept clean versus when he's under pressure. 93.9 passing grade when kept clean, 57.9 when under pressure. And Dawn, since week 7, you mentioned how their pass rush has been really good over the last few weeks. Since week 7, Colorado is 5th in the Power 4 with an 84.3 pass blocking grade this year. Jordan Seaton and a lot of the other guys they have, Cash Cleveland obviously as well, they have been dominating in pass blocking. And when last year, that was really their kryptonite, was the pass protection. Over the last, since week 7, they're 5th in the Power 4 in pass blocking grade this year. I will say, though, Kansas has done a pretty good job of getting after the quarterback right now. They're 33rd in pressure rate, 29th in knockdown rate. If you don't know what knockdown rate is, sacks and hits, basically. They're 29th in terms of how often they get those. They've done that while only blitzing on about 32% of their plays. It's 93rd in FBS in terms of blitz rate. And Kansas has got a really talented secondary, like you mentioned, with Melo Dotson, Kobe Bryant, our guy back there as well. So with those guys behind the front 7, I think in this game, they might be able to afford sending a blitz a little bit more, just to make sure they get after Shedeur Sanders. Because if you give that guy time back there, he will pick you apart. If you give that time back there against any secondary in America, I think he's able to win against any secondary in America. The only opportunity you have to make Shedeur Sanders look somewhat human is if you pressure him. And I think Kansas, they've done a pretty good job of getting after the quarterback, but I think if they blitz a little bit more in this game, that's the avenue for them to bother Shedeur Sanders a little bit to maybe have a shot at winning this game.
I'm going to do 2 call-outs right now. One, you mentioned Cash Cleveland, right? True freshman, walk-on center, Jordan Seaton's teammate at IMG. He's played in 3 games this year, played for the vast majority of the Texas Tech game, and then started last week. So far, 102 pass blocking snaps. No pressure. Not one from a true freshman walk-on center. That's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. They have found something with that guy. The other matchup I want to point out in the passing game is I think this could be another big week. I know he's had a couple of them. LaJohntay Wester in the slot for Colorado going up against Marvin Grant in the slot for Kansas. If you want to get away from Dotson and Bryant on the outside, that's kind of the one thing BYU doesn't have that they couldn't bother Kansas with last week, was some dynamic threat in the slot, right? Roberts and Lassiter work a lot on the outside. I think LaJohntay Wester could be a main target early in this game for Colorado. And of course, I got to call out the FAU legend when I can. But, I mean, those are a couple of guys I wanted to shout. But I do think this is a different challenge for Kansas defense. And the story is, as always, if you don't get to Shedeur, good luck to you.
Yeah.
That's just how that works. It's the tale as old as time now.
So, Dalton, ultimately, will Colorado continue to control their own destiny in the Big 12 title race, or for the 3rd straight week, will Kansas take down one of the best teams in the Big 12?
So I think absolutely we know they have the talent. Kansas can score with Colorado. I don't think there's any question with that. They have the talent to be able to score. You've got Daniels, you've got Neal, Highshaw, Skinner, Grimm. You've got plenty of guys who can play on offense. I don't love Kansas defense that much.
Yeah.
Okay, since Big 12 play started, they have the 7th lowest defense grade in the Power 5. I just don't know that they're going to make enough stops. If Daniels doesn't turn the ball over, I would expect this to be a high-scoring game. Now, I thought last week would be a high-scoring game, and we got 17-13. So BYU did a great job of shutting down the run game for Kansas. You shut down the run game, and you make Daniels beat you. I think you take your chances. You see if you can get the takeaways. But I like Colorado. I think it will be a high-scoring game on the road. Arrowhead Stadium. Shedeur gets to play in Arrowhead. How about for this one? But I'll take Colorado 38-31. I do think Kansas is dangerous, but I think the two differences are Colorado, I think, certainly has the better defense, and I can trust Shedeur more with the ball security, whereas Daniels, it's a 50-50 proposition. If he turns the ball over, this could be a blowout in Colorado's favor. If he doesn't, then we get a good game out of it. But there's really no scenario where Shedeur Sanders, outside of he has to get by the first drive of the game because he's got 3 interceptions this year on the first drive of the game, get by the first drive of the game and whatever that causes. But I think Colorado outscores Kansas anyway. I think they make enough stops to get a win on the road.
Yeah, I think Colorado's going to win as well. I got 35-27. I think Colorado's offensive line has really just figured it out over the last couple of months. And if you give Shedeur Sanders' time, you keep him upright back there, he'll put up at least 30 on almost any defense in college football, including Kansas, like you said, who has struggled in Power 4 play as well. I think the Buffalo survive in advance and move on and move 1-1 away from, I think, securing a Big 12 title game spot and potentially a college football playoff spot if they win out the rest of the season as well. So both got Colorado beating Kansas in this one. Next game we're talking about, Dalton, is Notre Dame against Army at Yankee Stadium, actually, in a 7 p.m. game on NBC. This is a game with enormous playoff consequences for both teams because Notre Dame, they have a 9-1 record this year, and they don't play in a conference title game because they're not in a conference right now. So that another loss for Notre Dame would pretty much kill probably their chances of making a college football playoff. They do have a win over Texas A&M in week 1, but it's almost negated by a very bad loss in Northern Illinois the very next week. And outside of that win over the Aggies, their next best win is over a Louisville team that just lost to Stanford and is now 6-4 on the season. So really, Notre Dame's schedule, I don't know if it's good enough to get in at 10-2. Probably is not good enough to get in, honestly, at 10-2 with all the schools that are currently fighting to get into the college football playoff right now. And then Army, they're 9-0 on the season. They're one of only 3 undefeated teams left in the country alongside Oregon and Indiana. If they beat Notre Dame, I would think that they would jump Boise State in the college football playoff rankings and be the highest ranked group of 5 team. Then they got to beat UTSA, and if they got to beat Tulane, who's also another ranked team as well, in the American Championship game, if they do that, I think they'll secure a college football playoff spot at 12-0 initially when the playoff rankings come out, and then they'll be 13-0 maybe if they beat Navy after that. If they lose this game, they're still alive for the playoff, but they'll need Boise State to mess up in order to get into the playoff.
Yeah, that's going to be a debate. Where did they have Boise in the ranking last week?
12.
Oh, I don't know if they would do it because I think
you
Army
have to, man. I think you have to.
Yeah,
I don't think they would either.
Yeah, but that means you're putting Army in the top 11. I don't know that they would.
I wouldn't have Boise that high to begin with, to be honest.
I get that. I totally get that part because they did lose to Oregon, which by 3 points at the buzzer, which is cool. I mean, it's great that they could compete with the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah.
But no, a win like this would change. It would change the perception some, or does it? I mean, could it put on the table that you get both? I don't know. I don't know that they would actually do it, but you would also have Army needing to beat Tulane in a conference title game, which is
huge too.
Nowhere near an easy win. Because Tulane is really, really good. They're raging hot right now. But no, this game, I'll tell you what, and I know that scenario is what it is. Every team looking for an at-large is rooting for Army to win this game.
Yeah.
No question. That's a spot. That's actually now become the biggest spoiler spot is the fact that Notre Dame is in over, who knows if it's a Tennessee or an Ole Miss or whoever might be on the borderline, A&M. Every other team is rooting for Notre Dame to lose this game or next week against USC.
Yeah, so Notre Dame really an elimination game, and Army is just trying to solidify itself as a college football playoff team with a win over Notre Dame. Dalton, you have the Army offense in this one. What should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
Okay, so Army's offense is still, unlike Navy, it's still the more traditional double wing, triple option, under center kind of old school thing. It's not like Navy. They throw the ball a lot less than Navy. Army's really kind of stayed in the tradition of the classic triple option. I think for me, this is more about Notre Dame's run defense. And I think if you remember when we previewed them against Georgia Tech, I kind of had mentioned their run defense is kind of off this year. Like some guys in the middle, Howard Cross, Jack Kaiser, like it's like they haven't gotten in a rhythm. All right. They had a bye week in week 5. Let's look at it bye week in week 6. Let's look at it since week 7. All right. They've really turned it around in run defense now. Before their bye week in week 6, they were 75th in the country in run defense grade. It was just not, something about it wasn't right. Since that point, since week 7, they're up to 7th. They look like the Notre Dame defense that we know and love, right? And I think those two guys are a big factor in that. Jack Kaiser at linebacker playing a lot better. Howard Cross at defensive tackle playing a lot better. And they're getting some contributions from guys that, they got some guys transferred in, some guys are newer, younger guys, right? Jordan Clark in the slot, he's been really good. They moved Rod Hurd, who I figured was competing with Jordan Clark for snaps in the slot. They moved him to safety. He's been solid. Even a guy like Leonard Moore at corner has a 90 run defense grade. Cross has been better. Drake Bowe and Jack Kaiser, they've gotten contributions all over the place in run defense. And that's obviously going to be the biggest thing against Bryson Daly and this Army triple option attack. He's got 1,000 yards. He's got 21 touchdowns. The only player with more is Ashton Ginty. So this is a much more classic triple option versus big-time front seven matchup than we got against Navy. I was expecting Navy to come out and, they throw the ball more. They throw the ball like 3 times more than Army does. This is a more classic matchup of one team is up front and one team is stacking the box, and we're going to beat each other to death, and Army leads the nation in run blocking grade. It's going to be a physical running football game, really on both sides of the ball, but especially on this side, it's going to look a little bit different than the Navy game, a little more straightforward. But Notre Dame's run defense, they are well prepared, and they're playing like an elite unit lately.
They have been, and honestly, it's the same match from the other side of the ball as this Notre Dame run game. Can they impose their will in the run game? Because Dalton, the last time they faced off against a military academy, it was able to ride that run game to victory against Navy. They ran for 270 yards and 4 touchdowns against the midshipmen, averaging 6.9 yards per carry and 3 yards before contact per carry. They're getting 3 yards before they're even contacting the ball carrier. 3 different players in that game had at least 50 yards rushing and a touchdown in Jeremiah Love, Keidron Young, and Riley Leonard in that game. Notre Dame has been dominant on the ground all year. There wasn't just one game where they're really good. They are second in the Power 4 in EPA per run. They are second in the Power 4 in yards per carry, and they're second in the Power 4 in rushing grade this year. The offensive line has had some issues in pass protection, but they've been really good at moving people in the run game. They're 8th in the Power 4 in run blocking grade so far this year. Army, though, has done a really good job of limiting opposing rushing attacks this year, only allowing 4 yards per carry, which is 11th among all defenses in America. Only 2.6 of those yards come after contact, the 4th fewest in America. So they'll really need to play up to that level against Notre Dame and force Riley Leonard to beat them through the air, because if not, if Riley Leonard's able to run the ball on them and all the other great running backs Notre Dame's got to run the ball on them as well, I don't think Army stands much of a chance in this game. But if they force Riley Leonard into obvious passing situations, then the Black Knights stand a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you have to do. You got to get Notre Dame behind the chains, but they're really tough to get behind the chains right now. These backs and Riley Leonard's legs as well, they've really leaned into what they should be as an offense, is run the hell out of the ball. Riley Leonard throws it 20 to 25 times a game, and he just doesn't make mistakes. They have found the groove that they need to on offense, and they've got a lot of threats, and as always, they've got a good offensive line in front of them that's getting it done. So Notre Dame, they've really, I think they've done a nice job on both sides of the ball, finding the wheelhouse of what their team should be this year.
Yeah, definitely. So, Dalton, in this game in Yankee Stadium, who will ultimately keep their playoff hopes alive?
I think it's Notre Dame. I think, you know what, I thought the Navy game was dangerous, and they kind of proved, although Navy made a lot of mistakes in that game, and you just can't do that against a team like this, I think Notre Dame proved that that's not dangerous to them. And Army, a couple of weeks ago, they beat North Texas 14-3, and to only score 14 points on a defense like North Texas is kind of concerning to me, because that's not a great defense, and Army hasn't played a lot of great defenses. Actually, the best FBS team that they've played this year is East Carolina at 6-4. This is a different caliber of football. I really like what Army's done this year. They very well could win the American. It's going to be a really fun game with Tulane, but I think Notre Dame, they're riding it right now. They're feeling really good about their chances to win these last 2 games, to make the playoff, to be 11-1, and then they win football games their way. They found their identity. So I've got Notre Dame 35-13.
Yeah, I got Notre Dame as well, 31-17. 31-14, excuse me. Listen, dude, Army's offense has really just struggled the last 2 games, right? They averaged 17 points per game against North Texas and Air Force. And Dalton, those are 2 well below average defenses at the Group of 5 level. You go up against a top 10 defense like Notre Dame, I don't know how you're going to get right against them, honestly. So I think the Fighting Irish will win convincingly in Yankee Stadium, and now with USC on the horizon next week, that's the only time they have to mess up their year. I think if they beat USC and they beat Army, they will be in the college football playoff at 11-1. So I think they'll take care of business against Army and win by multiple scores against the Black Knights at Yankee Stadium. All right, last game we're talking about, Dawn, is Texas A&M at Auburn, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Story to know is this a trap game for Texas A&M right now? Because many in College Station are anxiously awaiting next week's regular season finale against Texas, and for good reason too. These are 2 arch rivals from their days back in the conference they were in before together. I think they're in the Big 12 together for a little bit before that. First time in 13 years those 2 teams are playing, and not only that, it also essentially serves as a playoff elimination game, with the winner likely moving on to the SEC title game. So massive, massive stakes in that rivalry game next week. The latter, though, is only possible to make the SEC title game if Texas A&M and Texas both take care of business this week. And of the two, the Aggies are more on upset alert, I would say. They're right now only favored by 2.5 points over Auburn, a school that has to win its final 2 games to qualify for a bowl game. It's going to be a night game at Jordan-Hare Stadium, one of the best environments in college football, a rabid fan base there as well. They can't be caught looking ahead to next week, or they will lose out on the conference title hopes and playoff hopes before even getting to the Texas game. And Dalton, I don't know if you saw this today, Mike Elko was caught slipping in his press conference when they asked him about it, and he said, our focus is single-handedly on Texas. I mean Auburn. So little Freudian slip there maybe from Mike Elko saying that. Obviously he's very focused on this game. I'm not trying to deny that, but even in the press conference, you could see the head coach, slipping a little bit, because obviously everyone's excited for that game next week. But this game against Auburn should not be taken lightly.
Especially this time of year, always respect your opponent. Because you know what? For as much as has been talked about, especially in the SEC, with this team would never beat that team and this one there, and they can't lose this game. Look, Kentucky beat Ole Miss. Vandy beat Alabama. We see upsets every single year. We see teams playing close games every single week and every single year. Auburn's still got a lot of talent on that football team, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, you know what? They probably, when you look at the style of A&M, they probably match up pretty well with it. So, and it's on the road. Don't ever mess with teams in a road game. No, absolutely, ever. Don't care who it is. We have seen this time and time again, and every single year we get reminded of people, how they lose that game? Because, well, that other team on the other side's got talent too. And Auburn, like you mentioned, trying to make a bowl game. They got A&M this week, and you got the Iron Bowl next week, as always. But this is, again, we've seen it with several games that we're previewing. Take a team lightly and watch what happens. Don't mess around. It's only 2 weeks left.
You can't mess around.
And you don't have time to make up for it. I don't know what in the world would happen if – it's not a scenario that's probably going to happen. But if A&M were to lose to Auburn and turn around and beat Texas, then I don't know what the hell would happen. But, no, you just – that's what it is, especially in November when teams got – what does Auburn have to lose?
Yeah, nothing.
They're already 4-6. Let's just play football.
Yeah. No, and they're fighting for a bowl game too. I know they play Alabama next week as well, but they're fighting for a bowl game as well. And I'm just telling you now, Dalton, if they end up winning this game – the Auburn social media team is going to put up historic numbers using that quote from Mike Elko, being like, oh, want to overlook us now, huh? Yeah, I think that is going to be really funny to see if they actually end up pulling it off. But Dawn, if they pull it off, what they got to do offensively to win this game?
Okay, we're gonna sound like two people just mirroring each other, like usual, probably. But Auburn wants to run the ball to win. Okay, Peyton Thorne, it's not great. Against Power 4 teams this season, he's got a 71 passing grade with 9 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. That's just kind of where we're at. That's Peyton Thorne. He's going to be a placeholder for a team with a good running game. And he's got good receivers, Cam Coleman, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and those guys on the outside. But at the end of the day, Auburn wants to run the football, and they want to run it with Jarquez Hunter, who's had a really good year. 84.7 rushing grade, got over 1,000 yards, 7 yards a carry on the season. I'll take that any day of the week. He gets 7 yards a carry in this game. Probably going to win the ball game. Let's just face it. 47 missed tackles. 4.5 yards after contact per attempt. That's a top 10 mark in the country. This is one of the better backs in the country, and a guy, because of Auburn's record, we haven't got to talk about a whole lot. Now, is a heavy chunk of his yardage in 3 games against New Mexico, Kentucky, and Louisiana Monroe? Yeah, kind of. It's like a little over half his yardage right there. He had 278 rushing yards against Kentucky. That's just ridiculous. But, I think what it is for him is you can see he's really good because he's had to kind of work through a mediocre offensive line against Power 4 teams. Their offensive line is a 64.5 run blocking grade, very much middle of the pack, right? But look, if they can ride Hunter and they can get enough play action from Peyton Thorne and just avoid the mistakes with Peyton Thorne, really, then they can play the kind of gritty game that you probably should play against Texas A&M. You got to be physical, you got to run, you got to stop the run, right? We saw this. We saw Texas A&M in a similarly styled game. Now, I'm not saying Auburn is as good as South Carolina, but in a similar kind of matchup, South Carolina was the more physical team and went out and dominated Texas A&M, which is a big deal. Now, you do have to fight with this defensive line, right? Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner. This defensive line has the 3rd best run defense grade in the country, behind, I think it's Ole Miss and Michigan that they're behind. That's how good they've been in run defense. So at that first level, can Auburn's offensive line do enough? Can they create enough space for Hunter to operate? Or is it all going to shut down because A&M's defensive line is too good?
Yeah, And really, Dalton's the other side of the ball, too, is the run game. Honestly, with Auburn's run game and Texas A&M's run game, it's all about the run game in this one. Really, can Auburn force Marcel Reed to win with his arm? It's my matchup to watch in this one because ever since they made the switch to Marcel Reed from Connor Wigman, the Aggies' offense has been really centered around his rushing attack. During his 5 starts, they've run the ball on over 51% of their plays, the 14th highest rate among Power 4 schools. He has 321 rushing yards during those 5 games, third among Power 4 quarterbacks in those 5 games. He's had his fair share of issues as a passer, though, this year. He's a 58.9 passing grade. It's 124th in the country, 65% adjusted completion rate, 125th in the country. And your star running back, Le'Veon Moss, is out for the season now. So now, all of a sudden, Marcel Reed's legs are more valuable than ever as the Aggies continue to try to win off their ground. Because, like I said, their passing game just hasn't really been that reliable. Dalton, Auburn's defense has been one of the best in America at defending the run this year. They're right now 8th among FBS teams in run defense grade at 92.3. They only allow 3.9 yards per carry. That's the 7th fewest in the country. 0.9 yards before contact, 2nd in the country, only behind Ole Miss so far. They've had their issues with mobile quarterbacks before. They allowed a combined 182 rushing yards to Taylon Green and Michael Hawkins Jr. during those 2 losses in September. But without a really star running back to worry about in Le'Veon Moss, now all of a sudden Marcel Reed is probably the best runner they have left on their team right now. I think if they can force Reed to rely on his arm, I could see Auburn having a great chance of pulling off this upset.
Absolutely, and I think you had a tandem back there with Moss and Daniels that were both really good, kind of working back and forth, and Moss was the more physical of the 2 guys. Daniels is still there, but he hasn't seen that heavy a workload. He doesn't have any more than 13 carries in any game this season. So I think A&M might have to get a little bit creative. They do have a quarterback they can get creative with. We saw that in the LSU game, but also, you saw in the South Carolina game, if you're just more physical than A&M and you make tackles in the open field, you're not going to have a huge issue with their passing game, right? And this game is very much going to be about who can get ahead. I think who can get ahead and who doesn't make that big mistake that flips the field and gives the other team a short field. It's going to be a physical, I think, tight football game between two teams that really want to accomplish all the same things.
Yeah, definitely. So, Dawn, is this a trap game for Texas A&M, and will they lose before even getting to their biggest game of the season against Texas, or will they take care of business against Auburn?
I think they find a way. I think more so maybe than take care of business, I think they find a way. I've got A&M 23-16. It's going to be defense, it's going to be running the ball, and it's going to be about which quarterback can avoid mistakes when they're asked to throw the football. I'm not sure either of them throws the ball more than 20 times in this game, and I don't think either of them probably should throw the ball more than 20 times in this game, but the unit I trust the most in this game is Mike Elko and Texas A&M's defense, and that defensive line. I think they're going to shut down Auburn's offense, and especially if they get him in obvious passing situations with Peyton Thorne, I think it's going to be a real problem for Auburn. 23-16 Aggies, but I think it's going to be tense all the way through.
I got it 21-17 as well. I think this game has the potential to be ugly, really ugly, with how good both defenses are and how much both passing attacks have struggled this year. Again, I would not be surprised if Auburn pulls off this upset, but I will pick them to survive this game and set up a colossal showdown with Texas next week. But I think both offenses are going to want to rely on the run game. You have 2 really good run defenses as well, and 2 really good defenses overall, and 2 passing games that just haven't really found it that much this year. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if this game's in the teens, honestly. If it's like a 17-14 game or something like that, I think this game could be really, really ugly. But I do think Texas A&M will survive and set up a massive game with Texas in the final week of the regular season. All right, Dalton, before we get to our upset picks, we got to talk about the updated college football playoff rankings that literally just happened that we saw from the committee. And the first thing we got to talk about, Dalton, the top 4 seeds are as follows: Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State. Boise State, not a Big 12 team, is currently getting a first-round bye in the college football playoff. What's your initial reaction to that?
Which means, I think, Boise State, I think I just saw, is still at 12, which means BYU is probably at, 13 or 14? They're at 14. that's a huge deal. I think when you talk about then a Big 12 team, whether it be BYU or Colorado or Arizona State, they'd have to find a way to pass up Boise State. And if Boise State, you get some other teams, a couple other teams loose in front of you, not just being at 12 and then into 4, but if they can move up, or if they got to be feeling really good about that. If they don't have to play an extra game, they can sit and wait for an opponent for a week and see where it goes. But that's a big development. I think there was a lot of curiosity about how far BYU would fall, because look, we can sit here and look at all the analysis and say, well, Kansas is better than the record, but they're still going to go, well, that team's 4-6. You lost. You're the fourth win of a team. That team was 3-6 walking in there. They're going to look at that more objectively and go, yeah, not good. So I do get the reasoning behind it. I can sit here and scream that Kansas is better than their record, but your record is your record, and at some point we have to get objective about this. You lost to a 3-6 team at home. So it's not that surprising. It is visually quite shocking to see it, and it's really something. Wouldn't that be something if Boise did end up with a bye week out of all of this after everything we've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to recap the first round matchups of what it would be right now, you got Ohio State playing BYU. You got Notre Dame playing Alabama in the 8-9 game. You got Penn State playing Georgia in the 6-11 game. You got Indiana playing Ole Miss in the 7-10 game as of right now. So I don't agree with it necessarily. I do think BYU should be – I even think they should be ranked above Miami, honestly.
The full resume probably still should be BYU over Boise State, but – again, with the rest of the conferences that aren't SEC or Big Ten, there's going to be some sort of controversy at the back end of this. But, I think all it did establish, too, though, is that the ACC and the Big 12 are going to be one-bid leagues, and it's not going to matter a whole lot. The one thing that has been mentioned is if you have BYU as a team, I think it was something like if you have BYU or Boise as potentially two teams outside the top 12, or there's some scenario where it's like somebody, probably an SEC team, is going to be really, really livid, as I'm sure Tennessee is with these rankings about, okay, we think we're better than a lot of these teams we should be in anyway. And because Tennessee is what? Does that mean they're number 11?
They're number 11 overall.
Yeah, so you've got a team now that's number 11 with two teams behind them getting in because of the conference champion thing, and I go, well, That's how we built it. And look, Tennessee got every opportunity. I mean, I still think their playoff fate at the end of it comes down to beating Vanderbilt and finishing 10-2, but they've got to be feeling like they're on that border where they could finish 10-2 and not make it.
Yeah, and one another thing too. Listen, I know head-to-head is definitely not the end-all be-all. We're seeing that with the SEC, right? With the SEC, everyone's beating up on each other. But I will say, Dalton, SMU being ranked above BYU is a travesty. SMU lost to BYU, and BYU has a much better resume than SMU.
Yeah, and that was at SMU also.
That's a travesty.
No, I'm with you on that. That's why I was surprised that you said 14. I was like, who's sitting 13? And that's SMU. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, I hate that. But anyways.
But I think it's because, I don't know, it doesn't make sense really, because they lost to BYU, but then BYU lost to a team that was 3-6. How do we – it's the age-old question of how do you balance head-to-head versus other stuff. But
they beat Kansas State though by 29. I think Kansas State's better than anyone.
It's still a really good resume. It's just I don't know. We've got this. There's a whole debate to be had about what the resume is, and just assuming SEC teams are better when they've lost to different teams throughout the country and all of that. It's gonna be a thing we can never get away from. But that is a little odd.
And you did say that everyone's rooting for Army to beat Notre Dame this week, and that's true probably for the SEC schools. I don't know if that's true for Colorado. Colorado now, if you win the Big 12 and you're 2 losses,
no, they'll put Colorado in
just for the ratings,
in part, but also
there's a world where 13-0 Army and a 12-1 Boise State get in over Colorado.
They will not put Army in over Colorado. They won't.
If they go 13-0 with wins over Notre Dame and Tulane,
they're not going to do it.
I don't know.
They will.
I don't know.
You know how these things go.
I don't know, man. I know how they go, but there's an argument there. There's certainly a very good argument there.
There's an argument if they were to beat Notre Dame and Tulane, and
Tulane's right now number 20.
Yeah,
and Notre Dame's number 6.
We don't think they're going to win this week, but you never know. And the Tulane game will be a fantastic game. Also, Tulane's sitting there just as a team that's like, hey, we're here. We're still here. Like,
yeah, I think they definitely need Boise to lose a game.
Yeah,
they can't get in without it. But I don't know if you beat the number 6 team in the country and the number 20 team in the country.
It would be a thing.
And you're 13-0, and Colorado's
sure.
got 2 losses.
But if they beat Notre Dame, then Notre Dame's out, and you still have another spot.
But Notre Dame would still be like what, top 15 probably.
I mean,
top 20.
At that point, would they dare make Colorado, even if they were a 6th conference champion, would they make them an at-large?
Maybe.
Only have 2 losses.
Maybe.
It'd be 11. You'd be sitting 11-2. You'd have
it's a nightmare right now.
Army could screw up the entirety of college football this week.
Yeah, they absolutely can.
They could. But no, that's interesting when you see Boise in that bye week spot and you go, now it's real. It's in front of us.
But what's big for Boise as well is that UNLV is currently number 24. So if they beat UNLV,
they ranked UNLV.
Yeah. So if they beat UNLV, it's another ranked win.
And if they do it twice, well, they may not be able to do it twice because you saw Colorado State. Right now is the most likely team to beat.
Oh, right, you're right.
They're playing, so UNLV, I believe, needs Colorado State to lose a game to try to get in there.
Yeah, and officially, it's a top 5 matchup between Ohio State and Indiana, number 2 versus number 5.
I'll tell you what, the 2 games I love right here. If we did get Alabama, Notre Dame, and Ole Miss, Indiana, we'd be having a good old time. What a day that would be for the state of Indiana. Two home games like that.
Although it's a closer drive for us, I do think Penn State, Georgia would be insane environment to go to if we go to that.
I'd be a little worried for you.
I'm worried. I'm definitely worried.
I'd be
so scared.
I would be a little worried.
Yeah, I'm not picking Penn State to win that game.
I would be afraid of that.
I'm afraid, but I think that'd be a hell of an environment to go to because we are trying to go to a first-round game this year.
Absolutely.
So that'd be a hell of a game to go to. But obviously, long way to go before the final college football playoff rankings. Another 3 weeks left until we get to Selection Sunday. Before we go, Dawn, we got to give out our upset picks of the week. Again, outside of these 7 games, what team that is currently an underdog do we think is going to outright win this week? Let's go over the standings from our upset picks right now. Dawn, I thought I was taking the lead in this one. I have 706 points right now. I hit my big upset of Syracuse over Cal. Problem was, though, you hit a much bigger upset. I think the biggest one of the entire year, picking New Mexico to beat Washington State at plus 400 dogs. Now you have 957 points in your upset picks. I'm at 706, and Eli is down at 648 right now. I'll start off with you. You're leading off right now. What is your upset pick of the week?
Make it a vibes pick. I don't know. I don't know what vibes are or how they work, but I'm making a vibes pick here. You know what? I don't love the vibe at LSU right now. We got a couple losses in a row. Lost at the Swamp last week. We're out of playoff contention. We're out of SEC contention. We got guys yelling at each other on the sideline. But is there a more vibe team right now this year than Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt? And I know it's a night game, and I know it's at LSU, and that's always dangerous. But you know what? LSU's not playing great football right now. And Vandy, you know what? Even if they're 6-4 now, they've had a good season, they're bowl eligible, they're playing loose. They're playing loose, and Diego Pavia is going to go out there and keep playing hard, and they're going to keep playing hard under Clark Lee. I'll take Vandy in Death Valley, dangerous at night, plus 220 over the Tigers. Don't love what's going on at LSU right now.
All right. Yeah, Diego Pavia slaying another dragon in the SEC. I don't know if you can call it a dragon right now for what the LSU is. Maybe just a lizard.
They have the same record.
Yeah, that's true.
And yet LSU, I think, is 7.5 or 8-point favorites.
That's true.
Somewhere in there, but they have the same record. Wouldn't it make sense that Pavia won a night game at Death Valley? Just to do it?
He would do it. He would absolutely do it. Eli, what is your upset pick of the week?
We're fading Vautech. Vautech was a team coming in, had a lot of hype. I like Duke, got some great defensive players, and I think Malik Murphy's been playing really well down the stretch. I just like the value, too. Plus 132. Need to get back on the board. If anything, I just need to get ahead of Max. So, taking Duke 132 over Virginia Tech.
That's what we need right there.
How often are we doing this past the regular season or no? Because if that's going to be my strategy for...
I don't know how we could, because we're going to preview every conference title game.
It's not going to matter. We still got to pick.
We still got to pick them. Right, so.
Well, I guess bowl games? So we're doing bowl games?
I don't know. So I might. All right, I'll keep mine now, but I might have to go with a massive one next week to make up for and try to beat you.
Big swings.
So I won't do it this week. I'll try to get within striking distance of you. Then maybe I could take another one next week. But I'm taking Air Force plus 145 over Nevada. Air Force is pretty hot actually recent weeks. They have won 2 straight. It's been a rough year for them. They won their first game of the season. Then they lost 7 straight. They won the last 2 though. They beat Oregon State by 28. They won 28-0. They beat Fresno State the week before by 8 points. They're playing a Nevada team that's had a lot of issues this year, I think. So Nevada's currently 3-8 on the year. They've lost their last 4 games. I think Air Force is getting hot at the right time right now, and Nevada's really not right now. So I think Plus 145 for Air Force. I think they'll take down Nevada in that Mountain West game.
It's reasonable. I didn't realize Nevada had kind of faded because they got off to a reasonably good start. They were looking better at the beginning.
Almost beat
of the year.
SMU.
Yeah. It was week. Was that week 0? Week
0.
It was week 0. That's like the first college football game we watched this year. No, that was a fun one. They were getting better early in the year, but if you look, find a team that's cold and pick against them. I get it.
And Air Force, like I said, is red hot right now. So I'm picking the Falcons to beat Nevada, the Wolfpack. But that's what we got for our Week 13 preview show. And I'll remind you guys that we have a Week 13 review show every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be going over all the biggest results probably from a lot of these games, maybe even more if we get more chaos to happen in college football in Week 13. So Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for our Week 13 review show. We'll also might be having some other miscellaneous videos coming out the rest of this week as well before, obviously, a chaotic Saturday of college football. Before producers back there and Tyler and Eli for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Sunday morning for our Week 13 review show.